Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Also news this week on Tuesday, the House Ways and Means Committee voted to release 6 years of President Trump's tax returns. As we record this on Thursday afternoon, we're still waiting for those. The committee says it is doing some careful redactions of that material. But Kim, what do you make of this, and particularly this report that the Ways and Means Committee also put out with their criticisms of the IRS presidential audit program?
This is unprecedented. It is another wrecking ball to standards and norms, and it's setting a very bad precedent, especially given the very flimsy pretext upon which Democrats are basing this. Donald Trump, everyone remembers, refused to release his tax returns. I should point out that we at the editorial page were very critical of that decision. We think they should be put out. But he didn't. The voters elected him anyway. Nonetheless, Democrats have been clamoring from them from the beginning. The chairman of the Ways and Means Committee has the power under the law to take a look at private taxpayer data. To do so, you have to demonstrate a legitimate legislative purpose for doing so. And after fumbling around with a bunch of different excuses that didn't really wash, Democrats finally landed on this obscure thing called the IRS Presidential Audit Program, and they claimed that they needed to exercise oversight of this. And it's a little bit of a joke. What it turns out is that the IRS, since the 1970s, has had something written in its IRS manual saying that a president's income tax returns are, quote, subject to mandatory examinations. But as the 25-page report Democrats put out Tuesday explained, that nothing in that manual says anything about the timing or scope of these reviews. So Democrats are unhappy because they say, well, we looked at all of Trump's tax returns, and of 6 years worth of them, the IRS only conducted this, quote, mandatory review in one case. But again, there isn't anything necessarily saying that they have to do every single one. And more importantly, they failed to note that, in fact, 5 of his 6 returns were actually audited, just not part of a special presidential audit program. So everything they put out in this report is kind of hokey, and yet they're using it as an excuse to publicly release Trump's tax returns, something that's never been done before. And again, is going to set a very terrible precedent because future majorities in the House can now, it's fair game to go after anybody's tax reports, I guess.
The point about timing, I think, is a fascinating one. There's some news reporting that representatives for President Obama and President Biden are saying that they were routinely audited by the IRS when they were in office. On the other hand, probably no president in history has had as complicated of an income tax return as President Trump did, given his business empire, all the companies and pass-through entities that he was operating. And so the report from the Ways and Means Committee, I think, is fascinating because it says that Trump's 2015 tax return was filed in 2017, selected for examination in 2019 while he was in office. The 26 return was filed in 2017 and selected in 2019 for examination while he was in office. The 2017 return was filed in 2018. 18 return was filed in 19. Those were selected for examination in 2021. And so part of what is unclear for me from this report is what's going on here is just that President Trump has complicated tax returns and it takes a while to get through them. He files them probably not in April the way that most taxpayers do. He gets an extension and files them in the fall. So there's some added delay there. And Jillian, part of what I find so confusing about this argument from Democrats that they need to release the tax returns themselves is that they have written a 25-page report about the IRS audit program, criticizing it, raising questions, maybe some of them are good questions, and making some recommendations. And I don't see why, if the legislative purpose was to do oversight of this IRS audit program, that has not already been fulfilled without dumping into the public domain 6 years of President Trump's private taxpayer information.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on this. I mean, the argument kind of falls apart the second you poke it. I think the sole point of dumping this is to embarrass Donald Trump. I mean, one thing that we might find out is that he's not as wealthy as he claimed to be, but that's embarrassing. That's not a political import. And, I think that the tax records have become something that's an obsession on the left among Democrats, in the same way that on the right, under the Obama administration, you'd get people saying, oh, like, we really need to dig up Obama's college transcripts. I mean, you have to ask yourself at some point how much value this actually provides to the political discourse. It's not a lot. This is not a legitimate exercise of oversight power. It's a political stunt.
And particularly dumping them in public 2 weeks before Congress is about to change hands into Republican control. That does not look to me like a real honest effort at oversight of anything. Kim, is there much precedent at all for a House committee like this publicizing private tax information?
That's the other joke, is Democrats are claiming, Republicans did this in 2014. Now, there was a release of some nonprofit tax returns back in 2014, which happened under Republicans. It was very limited, and it was done in aid of demonstrating to the Department of Justice some of the Republican claims about the IRS's targeting of conservative nonprofits in the years prior. This is a very different situation. The Republicans weren't going after somebody by releasing these tax returns. They weren't trying to punish the people whose tax returns were there. They were trying to show that those particular nonprofits have been victimized by government, which really is a form of oversight, and also trying to make public to the Department of Justice some of these crimes. This is an entirely different scenario. It's entirely about humiliating and wounding a political adversary. And again, this gets to my point about the precedent that is being set. Because, for instance, if really this presidential audit program is such a mess as Democrats claim, why wouldn't House Republicans now come in and say, we're going to continue that oversight? And as a result, we need all the information about Joe Biden's tax returns. Oh, and by the way, that of his family members too, Hunter Biden. And then we need to make all of those public so that people can see what's going on via this presidential auditing program. It's almost a layup for the next Congress if Republicans wanted to go down that road. But think about where this could go in other ways too. Right now we're talking about the president, but I could see much more easily a Republican clamor if there was some kind of scandal involving a progressive activist group saying, well, we really need to look at the tax records of this organization, Planned Parenthood, or, name your nonprofit on the left, and just use this process or some other flimsy legislative oversight purpose to start making these tax records public. This ability by the House Ways and Means Chief to access these records, it's something called a 6103 power. It's very rare. It's given to only a handful of people in Congress, and it's always been used with great political restraint because everyone has always understood the danger of using it for political opportunism, and Democrats have now broken that barrier.
But it seems to me that suggests another route that Republicans could go here now. As Kim lays out, one path is to say what's good for the goose is good for the gander and go after Hunter Biden's tax returns or whoever. Another is to stand on principle and to continue to say what Democrats did here with President Trump's tax returns was not precedented. It was not justified. And we're going to go back and look at that law. And maybe the House Ways and Means Committee ought not to be able to get a named individual person's tax returns, that Congress in this partisan era cannot be trusted with that power. Or maybe they can put some limitations on the release of that information. Jillian, it seems to me that I would much rather have Republicans make the second argument than to go further down this path of mutually assured partisan destruction. And we'll give you the last word.
Boy, would I love to see Republicans stand on principle on this. Unfortunately, the temptation and the political pressure to exert political revenge is going to be so incredibly intense. And that's really unfortunate because I think it comes at the expense of Americans' privacy, fundamentally. This is going to be weaponized in all kinds of unpredictable ways in the future. And it's just a terrible precedent to set.
Thank you, Jillian and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.